Hello, this is Sonika Chojecka and this is Go Against the Tide TV. And we have a special program because we have special guests in the Lublin studio. Ken and Dave, students from Hong Kong living in Poland, are with us. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us. Yeah.
And the chief of the Go Against the Tide TV, Paweł Chojecki.
Hello.
Hello. We will talk about Hong Kong and Hong Kong protest because despite you're in Warsaw, we are really engaged in this whole protest. And could you tell our viewers why Hong Kongers are protesting in Hong Kong so long?
Okay, what happened in Hong Kong over the past few months? In the beginning, it's about an extradition bill. Simply speaking, we don't send suspects to China for trial for obvious reason, because there's lack of rule of law, no protection for human rights, and no fair trial. That's why Hong Kong restricts sending suspects to China. But early this year, Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam wanted to remove these restrictions. Not only the legal professions or democratic supporters said it's wrong, but also international community said so, including the Chamber of Commerce from all over the world, because it doesn't suit one country to system. Over the past few months, there were a lot of marches against this bill. Most significantly, that took place on the 9th of June. That one was the first million people took to the street. But we demanded Carrie Lam to withdraw the bill completely. But she refused and demanded the second reading debate on the 12th of June. That it triggered a general strike on the 12th of June. People gather near to the Legislative Council building to protest while police fire tear gas, rubber bullets, beanbag runs to disperse the protester and assault the journalists. And even the police commissioner, Stephen Low, declared the clash as a riot. So it provoked protesters to begin asking for an independent inquiry on police brutality, which is our second demand, and urging the government to reject the riot characterization, which is our third demand, and declare amnesty for all arrested protesters. A few days later, on the 15th of June, Carrie Lam announced the suspension of the bill, but we demanded a full withdrawal of the bill. A 35-year-old man committed suicide in protest and Carrie Lam's decisions. One day later, there was another march with double the size, 2 million people. A quarter of Hong Kong population took to the street in a peaceful manner against this bill, because protesters fear the bill could be revived. So the protesters continue to protest, calling for 5 demands, not one less. The final demand, which is universal suffrage for the elections for the chief executive, which is the leader of Hong Kong, and the elections of the Legislative Council, which is Hong Kong's parliament, without any structural political reform, and the government are chosen by the people, there's no possibility for Hong Kong to restore stability and prosperity.
You are protesting despite the brutality of the police, despite the threat of Chinese army intervention in Hong Kong. Where your strength and courage come from?
Because people finally feel that the extradition bill is going to change the way of life in Hong Kong, and it's going to change one country to system, especially when it touched upon the legal system. People are worried and wanted to protect our legal system as the last barrier against the Beijing's political interference. So not only the ordinary people, but also the businessmen are also worried. They also spoke out. Businessmen usually are conservative and close to the government, but they also spoke out. And so this bill woke up a lot of people that if we don't do something about this, then nothing will change. So, and then we also learned that foreign government issued their concern and warning against Hong Kong government over this bill. So we know that we have support from the international community. So that's why we just continue to protest, to fight for our freedom.
But how could it be that you organize so well? Because millions, as you said, of Hong Kongers went to the streets, and you have masks, you have umbrellas, you have many things, and it's very uniting that you're coming to the streets together. How can it be?
Well, before answering that question, I would like to compare the structure of movements between, as you remember, in 2014, there is another movement called Umbrella Revolution, and today protests. The structure of these two movements are completely different. So in 2014, we were fighting for the universal suffrage for our chief executive, and we occupied the streets for 77 days. And the occupation movement was motivated and led by some key organizations and or leaders. For example, as you may know, Benny Tai and the student associations, and also Joshua Wong. And the movement failed, which had no political concessions made by the government. And the main reasons for the failure were despite the fact that the government used the police force and also the court to suppress the movement and accuse the protesters. And the main reason for the failure was the arguments intensified among the protesters, because there were different political spectrums, and so also we were argued about the means that we should use in the movement. So at the end, the movement failed because the leader were losing support and people just went away. But things have changed in this time in the anti-extradition bill protest. And there are no leader and no organization, only amateurs bring the movement forward. And although there are different opinions between the peaceful protester and the radical protester, and some protesters, they are demanding independence, and some prefer staying in one country, two system. But the thing is that there's a sentence or a say during the movement. It goes like, we fight on, each in his own way. Don't snitch on anyone. Don't distance ourselves to one another. So it has been more than 100 days, which is more than the one in 5 years ago. And the protest is still going on. And this has always been the principle of the movement. And now I'm going back to the question, how we organize and unite people. I can answer this question, both questions at once. So the first explanation in this question would be, I would say it's the evolution of the technology. So just as you may know, Arabic Spring happened in 2010, and Arabic protesters, they use Facebook, Twitter to spread the revolution into the neighbor countries, from Algeria to Egypt, and then Saudi Arabia, and so on. So this time, this movement in Hong Kong, there are two major platforms that led the whole movement without an organization or a leader. So the first one is called Telegram. It's an app. And the second one is the online forum called LIHKG. And Telegram is communication app, just like Messenger, Instagram, or WhatsApp. But it was invented by a Russian guy, and he lives in Germany. And the special thing about Telegram is that users are anonymous, and the phone number is hidden. A message can be destroyed after a period of time, and also the messages are encrypted. So especially under this white terror of the communist China, people want to protect their identities, and in order to avoid being like blackmailed or like harassed or even like prosecuted. So it can like, so it's a really good platform for us to organize these protests. So at the same time, it's not just a communication app. So it can also create a channel that receive broadcast messages. So there are some channels that have more than, I think, maybe 200,000 followers or like members in the group. So that's why they can receive messages. But at the same time, you can create some small groups or private chat that to organize something that's sensitive. So that's why we do it in this way instead of having leaders like what happened in 5 years ago. And the second platform is the online forum called LHKG. And the because this forum is like widely spread, because in Facebook, some posts or some like messages like are filtered because of the algorithm of Facebook. That's why we use this forum to discuss the issues and to organize events. And it is quite difficult to register an account on this forum because you need to have like a university email or internet service provider email to register this account, and which means that you can have only one account on this forum, and which represent the actual person in this forum. So therefore, there's kind of like a direct democracy taking place on this forum. So if you want to say something, or if you want to organize an event, you need support from other users instead of just having a leader to follow the leader to do something. So that's why we can keep the movement going on, because we already make the consensus or like the discussion on the forum, so people can know what they're going to do in the coming days or weeks, or what they have to like keep going instead of just following the leader blindness. So that's why we can unite people.
It's great because you're not only courageous but also smart, and you can organize this in this way, not to be infiltrated by Chinese communists. And maybe before we ask more questions, we can show you the unofficial first anthem, maybe, or song of the Hong Kong protest, singing Hallelujah to the Lord. And after that, more official anthem of Free Hong Kong, and with Polish subtitles.
何以為
It is very moving, this anthem of Free Hong Kong, even for Poles who don't understand the words. And we want to ask about this freedom, because in this anthem there are a lot of freedom and hope. Pastor Paweł.
And you are very young people, and these protesters in Hong Kong are younger even. So it's not popular in Poland to stand for freedom, to fight for freedom. So why freedom is so important to you?
Because Hong Kong is a Western-style society with Western ways of living, thinking, and Western values. We believe in liberal democratic values, rule of law, and independent judiciary, and freedom and human rights. That because Hong Kong was a British colony for 156 years, many generations of Hong Kongers live under the British rule. And in 1984, the Sino-British Joint Declaration was signed by the leaders of China and Britain that it states Hong Kong shall enjoy civil freedom and autonomy for 50 years after the handover in 1997. That except for foreign relations and defense affairs, in all other areas, Hong Kong enjoy higher autonomy. But we have seen the increasing interference from Beijing. Less and less autonomy for Hong Kong, more and more interference from Beijing. If the bill is eventually signed, it will bring an end to this guarantee by removing independent judicial power and so making the de facto end of one country, two system. So we have nothing to lose. What we can do is to fight for our freedom.
And also this first unofficial anthem, as Go Against the Tide said, and after us, BBC, they said about this beautiful song. This is a Christian song, singing Hallelujah to the Lord. And how can you, what can you tell about this spiritual background of the protest?
Well, I would say the spiritual background of the protest will be the identity of Hong Kongers. Like, for example, just like the former U.S. President Kennedy, he was in Berlin and Western Berlin when there was still the Berlin Wall, and he gave a speech about the freedom in to liberate the Berlin, and he said one word: "Ich bin ein Berliner," which means I am a Berliner. So at the same time, the same spirit, it spread around in Hong Kong. So we think that we are Hong Konger. So we have to defend our land. We have to keep this place to be like as good as used to be, and to be the freedom and the fairest society, and one of the best international cities. That's why we came together to fight against the communists and also to fight for the freedom. That's the spirit behind.
And but there are a lot of people imprisoned during the protest, and a lot of are injured, and even people died. Do you know how many people died because of this protest?
Up to this moment, over 1,400 people get arrested for different charges, including riot, unlawful assembly, assault police officer, obstructing police, and weapon in possessions. And then over 2,000 people were injured during the protests, and 9 people committed suicide, and 207 people was charged. And 2 days ago, a 10-year-old child was arrested by the police for 3 charges, including unlawful assembly, weapon in possession, but what weapon? Just a laser pointer, and spray graffiti. So nowadays, we Hongkongers, we concerned about the selective political prosecutions against protesters.
But there is a situation in Poland that many politicians say that China is not a communist country anymore. And what would you say to these people, to these politicians?
Well, I was actually this statement I would say is partly true and partly false at the same time. Actually, indeed, based on the economic development of and also the ideology of modern China, it is quite far beyond to be the traditional communist ideology like Marxism, Leninism, but because you can see people from China, they're getting richer and richer, and having new iPhone, Ferrari, Rolex, or more and more luxury goods. So it's obvious it's not communist, it's capitalist, right? And for example, also in coastal cities like Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Tianjin, people are enjoying the capitalist life, and there's a huge income gap and income difference between the coastal cities and the rural area. So this is the consequence of the Deng Xiaoping's openness and the reform policy adopted more than 35 years ago. But at the same time, nowadays China, they call themselves as a socialist country with Chinese characteristic, which means that China has opened up the country to attract foreign capital and investment. However, there are many communist characteristics remain unchanged. For example, state-controlled economy, communist patriotic education, and also one-party dictatorship, and so on. Actually, it doesn't really matter which ideology China adopts, and this is just a political propaganda for the state. More importantly, is that China is an autocratic country that suppresses the freedom of the citizens, and I would even define China as a totalitarian regime based on the egoistic expansionism to the world recently, and also the state are using these totalitarian means to maintain the stability of the Communist Party to be the only regime in China.
Why China communism is evil? Why it's a threat to Hong Kong for free world and to Poland?
Well, I think when we compare the Chinese Communist Party to the Chinese in history, and we can find lots of similarities. Recently, there's a term called chinazi becoming trendy on Twitter and also Facebook that implies China as the Nazi China, because what China does actually has no difference with the Nazi Germany. So it's not a false claim, and it's actually happening when we compare to to the Nazi Germany in history, and to compare the activities that China does. And like, in order to stable the communist regime in China, the state adopt Nazi tactics and strategies for example, in domestic politics. For example, China is like a one-party dictatorship, as I mentioned, just like Nazi Germany, and it is like a police state. So the party used the police force, the absolute power to maintain the stability of the regime. Just like Nazi Germany, they have Gestapo, so now they have the Chinese police, they call it Gong'an, something like that. And second thing, in China is not a rule of law, it's a rule by law. So they have no independent jurisdiction, so the court has to listen to the country's order. So that's why we were against the extradition bill, because we have different judicial system, and we have independent system, and we have rule of law, but not in China. And also it's becoming more and more important that the state use surveillance to monitor the citizens. So it's like Big Brother in the 1984, that book. And they use different technology like facial recognition, and also they have just imposed the social credit system. So this is like the one that happened in Black Mirror is now in the real life. And then like also when comparing to not why we call it chinazi, because something really bad happened in China, just like what Hitler did. So China, they set up concentration camps in Xinjiang area to capture the Uyghurs and also some political dissidents. So just like Hitler did during the war. And also there's a footage released that the Chinese state police, they escort the Uyghur Muslim from the train, and they were covered with their eyes and sent to the camp. So it was really terrifying, just like the concentration camp in Auschwitz. And at the same time, internationally and foreignly, China is expanding, just like Nazi Germany, Hitler's expansionism in Europe. So for example, maybe you guys have seen some videos or footage that some Chinese overseas students or overseas citizens in the foreign country hang out the Chinese flag and fighting against other Hongkongers who were protesting. So this is like kind of the extreme nationalism, and they promote in China. And also at the same time, we have mentioned about the Sino-British Joint Declaration, and they are violating the treaty, just like what Hitler did. He started the Second World War by invading Poland. Now China, they try to ignore this international treaty signed between Britain and China, that the democratic system and also the norms in Hong Kong has to remain unchanged, but they ignored these terms and they started to invade Hong Kong. And also, there are also territory invasion actually happening in Asia. And for example, in India, China had some territorial conflict with India in Dongnan district, and at the same time in South China Sea. And this it creates problem to the neighbor Southeast Asia countries like Vietnam, Philippines, and that's why this time we have support from Vietnam, because we have the common enemy and they are threatening the security. And also the last thing would be the economic invasion of China. So for example, they have the Belt and Road initiatives that they wanted to have economic cooperation with other European countries, but behind this cooperation, they have a bigger plan. So, for example, it really happened like in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is one of the Belt Road country, and China lent lots of money to Sri Lanka and for the economy. But unfortunately, this country, they are too poor, so they couldn't pay off. So they have to cede the port to China for 99 years. So this is the bigger plan, or like economic invasion behind China. So that's why my claim that China is a totalitarian regime is valid, just like Nazi Germany. That's why we said China is chinazi.
And that's the answer for my next questions. I wanted to ask you what is the danger from the Chinese communist two poles, for example, and but if you try to explain to the ordinary Pole, the young Pole who don't care about Hong Kong, don't care about Asia, China, whatever, but what is the threat, the danger for this ordinary Pole, men and women from the communist China?
Do you want to say something?
Okay, now we know that China has cooperated with some European countries by the Belt and Road initiative. That we can see that the Chinese companies that they start up in Eastern Europe and Central Europe, that like they have the sponsor from the Chinese government, so their products usually are cheaper than other brand. So when the people they go shopping, they usually sometimes they want to buy something cheaper. So it's not difficult to buy something from China.
Yeah.
For even like the mobile phone like Huawei or Xiaomi.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's why people are not difficult to have and buy the Chinese product, Chinese phone, but we have to be aware there's a back door in the phone. So our privacy, our information could be released and could be stolen by the Chinese government. So that's why we have to be aware that the Chinese invasions, not just geographically, but also from the economy.
Yeah, at the same time, it's not just if they invade, even they affect even the local or domestic politics. For example, maybe it's not known in Poland yet, or maybe we don't have evidence yet, but there are already evidence or already a case that Chinese officials try to bribe the African officials, like for the right of the oil field to use the oil field. So it has been the case in the United States. The former Hong Kong official, I forgot his name, but he is arrested by the United States government for helping the Chinese government to bribe the Congo former president. So this is already happening, that the Chinese government try to meddle the domestic politics in order to gain influence, that to have Chinese interest, to increase the Chinese interest. And this thing will affect the local people because the politicians are starting to serve the China instead of the citizens itself. So it's really a threat that worldwide.
Yes, thank you so much for these words, important words for us, because in Go Against the Tide TV, together with editor Hannah Shen, we are talking about the Chinese threat, I think, a few years, but our politicians, unfortunately, are, of course, we support America, the United States, and in the same time, we are in a strategic partnership with communist China, and this is the war in Poland between the West world and this communist world, and we are praying for better Poland, for free Poland, like you are fighting for free Hong Kong. We are fighting for free Poland.
As you know, Poland was a communistic domain for more than 50 years, and the communist is in our minds. So our politicians are very easy to be corrupted by Chinese communists. So it is very important what you have said to us about the methods of Chinese communists.
And together with you, we want to promote and want to ask you to come to the protest together against China's threat on 29th of September. It will be from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. In front of the Chinese Embassy, Świętojerska Street, Side Gate in Warsaw. And your last encouragement for Poles to come to your protest?
See you on Sunday.
There's one word, one phrase in Hong Kong is that yesterday Hong Kong, should be today Hong Kong, tomorrow Taiwan. So at the same time, it can be Poland. So
yes.
Today Hong Kong, tomorrow Poland. So today, if we don't fight for freedom, tomorrow we will lose our freedom.
Yes, amen. We agree totally with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Ken and Dave, students from Hong Kong, living in Poland, were our guests. Thank you so much for coming to Lublin.
Thank you.
And God bless Hong Kong, and we pray for you, and we will educate our Polish people about Hong Kong, about what you're doing there. And I think you will win because God will be with us.
Amen.
And Pastor Paweł Chojecki, the
Thank
chief
you.
of the Go Against the Tide TV, thank you so much and see you soon.